Welcome, Ishmael. Ish, as you are affectionately known. And I hear there's a story behind this name, so I'm looking forward to hear that story. But welcome and thanks for agreeing to participate in this project. I know you have a story, a fascinating story to tell, and so we want to capture it over these moments. And I'm going to start with a basic question of, just introduce yourself to future generation, people who might view this video beyond your role and titles. But tell us about growing up, about school, about your service in the military. Like, go for it. The floor is yours.
Okay, I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1945. I lived in a all-black community, and like I said before, even though we refer to it as all black, there were very light-skinned white black people in that community. I never met a truly white person because I thought that they were uh, it was a place where we weren't allowed to go, So it's like there was a boundary, and we never went outside the boundary. Now, growing up, until I was 5, I thought my name was Jeep because that was my family nickname. And
Jeepers?
no, just Jeep, like the
Oh,
like.
Jeep. Okay,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Because when my brother was a baby and they didn't have a name for him yet, they called him Pug. And so when I came along, and his given name is Donald. So when I came along, there was a comic strip, and the comic strip characters were Pug and Jeep. So naturally, I got to be called Jeep, and that's all I was called until uh, Mom was sending me to school for the first time, and she said, "Now, when you go to school, I want you. Your name is Ishmael Simpson Moran Jr." And I broke out in tears because that was just so. I was overwhelmed. It was just such a long name. And she went over and over and over it again, and so I was Ishmael in school, Jeep at home until junior high school. And before we get there, I became Ish, like junior high school, because of sports and the people I was going to school with. Now, um, growing up in Oklahoma, there are significant times in my life. I never
Mhm.
learned that Tulsa riots was a thing because my family didn't talk about it. It was a scandal, so to speak. So at that point, I realized I realize now that I lived a not only sequestered but um, a protected type of environment where I didn't know of things going on outside. Now, I took what happened for granted. In other words, when I let's see, we left. Important time in my life was my mother. My first memory
Mhm.
is of my father, biological father, assaulting my mother, and I was 2. He
Mm.
pushed her down and cut her lip. She started bleeding, and I didn't know what that was, but I knew that it wasn't supposed to happen, and I was really focused in that moment. And then the next thing I remember is people, guys coming in the uniform and taking him away. And that was Ish Sr. Now, that's the last I saw of him until I was in my 30s.
Wow.
Mom was one of those black women that wouldn't tolerate assaulting, abusive behavior.
Good for
Um,
her.
and at that point, I think the seed was planted that I shouldn't do that. I don't want to be that person, and I should protect my mother.
Mm.
She, my next memory, married a man named JD, who was my stepfather. And I was in my crib looking down the hallway. I think I might have been four. And they had come home from a party or something, you know. And my brother was over in the bed. I was in the crib, and I could see down the hallway. Well, he pulled a gun on my mother because he thought she was flirting with somebody or whatever, you know.
At the party.
Yeah. And uh, I didn't, I'd never seen a gun before, but I knew it wasn't a good thing, you know. And she looked down the hallway, and I guess because of the light of the hallway, she could see me, and she said, Jeep, come help mommy. And I don't know what I was thinking or what I was going to do, but I climbed out of the crib and went down the hallway, and JD put the gun away. And
Mm.
I stayed up with them, and because she was terrified of him at that point. And not long after, she divorced him. And we lived alone with my mother for the next 5 years or so. You know, we stayed with a woman called Aunt Mabel. And then she met my stepfather, Charles, and married him. And Charles, this is another turning point.
Hmm.
Charles was a good man. He was a nice man. He was reliable, responsible, intelligent, and he loved my mother. And he was kind of brusque, but no nonsense. In other words, use your intelligence and make the right decisions. If you don't, well, then we'll have a talk about it, you know. Um, and the only time he ever put his hands on me was when I disrespected my mother, and I only did that once. But at that point, he was an architect working at Fort Sill, and he got an offer to come to California to work with Holmes and Narver architecture. And
Mm.
so we picked up and we came to California, and we lived here ever since. You know,
How old were you then
I was
when
12
you were
when we
12?
moved here. I was 12. That was 1957. Um, and landing here wasn't as important in one aspect as getting here, leaving Oklahoma and starting a new life here, and him buying a home and us living in our own home
Mm.
with him. And then I went to school and was astounded by the people in my classroom and in the school. They were all different kinds of colors, you know. And I will give you a picture of that I happen to have of my class, my sixth grade class.
Mm.
And there may be four or five dots in there, black people. You
Right. So
know,
how was the transition for you from like coming from Oklahoma, where like you were doing school to school here in California? You talk about the diversity in the classroom setting, different kinds of family. How was the transition, the language, the accent? Because you know you're at the age where they might tease. How
they
was
did.
that?
They did. You know, the guys that I see, sports was a thing that I got involved with back in Oklahoma. I was just budding, and Charles took me to a basketball court, and he was making the shots, and I couldn't. And so I was like, damn, I can do better than this. But when I landed in California, uh, my friends up and down the street were usually black, and they would, and in the course of our conversation, they would like, come on, you know, because I spoke too slowly. I had a drawl, and I didn't know it, but I had an Oklahoma drawl.
You were an Okie boy.
Yeah, and it used to exasperate them, you know. But I just tried to emulate. And one of the things that I've noticed in my life that I've always lived kind of moment to moment.
Hmm.
So I landed in the classroom and I accepted it for what it was without a whole lot of
Right.
thought.
Processing or thinking
Yeah.
about it.
I didn't have a lot of how do I feel about this? It was just
Right.
like, whoa, okay,
This is where you are. This is what I
this
got to
is it.
do.
Uh-huh. And my first teacher she was white and she had very light, like Paul Newman eyes. And she liked me, I could tell, because she thought I was intelligent. I don't know why, but she would approach me it would make me uncomfortable to look into her eyes. Now we call it the eyes are the window to the soul. And I felt like I was looking where I shouldn't be. Now, part of that has to do with the black experience in Oklahoma and encountering a white woman and
Right.
I didn't I knew I was
Right.
uncomfortable. So uh she was the first person that I really met that was white that really focused in on me.
Mm.
And it has been important to me to kind of stay in the now because of that sheltering. Even when I left Marvin Avenue, I went to Louis Pasteur, and that was in 1957. And it was predominantly Jewish. So I went from a predominantly black community into one that was predominantly white. And there I began to live a bifurcated kind of existence. My home life and my neighborhood was predominantly black, with a few Asians, sprinkled in. And those are the guys I hung around with. The people that I went to school with were 90% white and Jewish.
Mm.
That was junior high and high school. Now, I played sports starting uh, like in grammar school when I first got here. We played ball. Our recess was just sports competition.
Right.
And then when I went to Pasteur, grades 7 through 9, we had after school sports. And this was organized by the school. So all of the kids were part of a after school sports program. Now, what that did was took care of the latchkey kids.
Mm-hmm.
Both of my parents worked. So I would participate from 3 to like 5 in the after school sports and come home and get home about the time that my parents did. So there wasn't what is it? The idle mind is the devil's
Right.
workshop. There wasn't a lot of that growing up. We were always involved in, if it wasn't sports at school, we'd come home and then we'd play sports outside in the street, football and baseball until the lights came on.
Right.
And we had to come in, because that mom coordinated it. So when the street lights came on, you came in the house in time for dinner.
By the way, did your parents add to the family after they came to California?
Say that again.
Did
Did
your parents add to the family after you came to California? Because you mentioned that it
oh
was you and your brother.
Now, I guess we actually landed here in 56 and moved in 57. But during at 56, she was pregnant with Charles's baby and had a miscarriage, and I didn't even know what that was all about.
Right.
I learned later that just how devastating that can be, you know. Uh, but my mom was always kind of stoic. In other words, she managed her emotions.
Right.
She didn't do. She used to wear me out with when I misbehaved, and she'd say, like, you must not love me. Why would you? I worked my fingers to the bone, and I would rather give her the strap. Say, just go ahead and spank me. Don't give me this talk. You know, in all of my years, I never heard her shout. Even when she was trying to call me in, the house or
Right,
something,
off
the
the
other
street.
kids would go, Ish, I think that's your mom. But she just had a soft voice, and she was not antagonistic to people. In in my schooling, I felt,
By the way, Ish, before you go on,
uh-huh.
I hear you start using the Ish name. What's the
Oh,
story? Give the backstory on how you became
okay,
Ish.
because I got away from that. Okay. So I'm Jeep. I'm coming home from school from first grade, or yeah, I think it's the first grade. And I'm walking down the street in Tulsa with a guy I just met, you know, because we're going the same way and we're walking up the street. And I said, he asked me, where do you live? And I said, oh, I live right up there. And he said, oh, I live down the street, so and so and so and so. And we kept walking, and he said, and what's your name? And I said, my name is Jeep. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. He said, my name is Jeep too. And I said, what? His, and we both had kind of the same experience. His name was Laverne. My name was Ishmael. So we kind of bounced off of that. Now, uh, I was Ishmael until I got to California. And I became Ish because the kids just didn't have enough in them to say all that. And what they try and do is
That's
tease.
too much.
Yeah, well, they would try and tease me with my name, the full name, and they'd get chest boned. That's where we used to go around, hit each other in the chest all the time. So I would do that. I was good at that. So they started calling me Ish. My neighbors still call me Jeep. But at school, they began to call me Ish.
Mm,
They shortened it. Uh, and I think that it was the Jewish community kind of took to it. And then it came backwards, um, especially when I played sports.
hmm.
Uh, if they were announcing something, it would just be Ish Moran, not Ishmael Moran. It's too much to say.
Right.
Although if they wrote it up in the paper or something, it would always be the full name, Ishmael Moran. And I have articles from high school and junior college kind of illustrating the fact that they really had difficulty with the name Ishmael. They couldn't spell it. They, I mean, they'd spell it all Ishamel or without the A, just all kinds of things.
So Ish was just easier.
It was just easier and it felt like me.
Right.
Okay. And I, I told one of my sports buddies that I felt invisible in junior high and high school. And he said, what? He said, you were the only black guy I knew, really knew. And he said, and you played sports and you dressed well. You were reasonably good looking. He said, how does that equate to feeling invisible? And I told him it's the word feeling. And it's the way I felt
Right.
because I couldn't really connect with the other ethnic population at that time because I didn't know.
Right. Right.
Who are these people befriending me? You know, um, and I stayed ish all through the army. You know, um, and even in the probation department.
Hmm.
The identity of Ish, rather than just the name,
Right.
really came to fruition in the probation department
Mm.
because it became an identity that the kids could deal with, that the staff could manage,
Mm,
and that supervisors had problems with because they thought if the kids called me Ish, they were disrespecting me. Their view of respect was you have to be called Mr. So and so.
right.
My view of respect was in how you responded to me,
Mm.
not what you called
Connection
me.
and connection, right? Not just name
Yes,
calling.
yes. I said they can call you Mr. So and so and be calling you a real son of a bitch at the same time. But they can call me Ish and really be trying to connect and be understood and respect me. Some kids would call me Mr. Ish, trying to be really respectful.
Mr. Ish. Yeah, that sounds like
Uh-huh.
a TV character, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so I've always been Ish Moran in the probation department. And then when I began to teach yoga, I was Ish Moran as the yoga instructor. So uh, two very different fields, two comparable roles. Because I see myself now as having been um, a teacher, a confidant, a counselor, and an instructor.
So, Ish, let me ask you, because I kind of wanted to capture this here before we'll get to this um, question and then move to the early influences. Your sports, I heard you played a lot of basketball, that you were
Mhm.
pretty good at it.
Mhm.
When did you first realize you could play, and what are some of the highlights of your playing both in high school, in JC, and I think you play at California State in which campus? Was it LA
Yeah,
or
Cal State
Fullerton?
LA.
You were at Cal State LA. So yeah,
Mhm.
talk to us a little about some of that experience.
Okay, I used to knock around playing basketball and I didn't have an opinion of whether I was good or not. I knew that I just enjoyed playing.
You played.
Yes, I show up, give it your best, and play. And even at the park, there were guys that I played with, and we'd go to war. But it was the enjoyment of it, and as hard as we played, the closer we were.
Hmm.
And I went. I guess I'll show you. When I got to Hamilton, I played on the B team. That's the young team.
Hamilton is high school or
High
junior
school,
high?
high
High
school.
school.
Yeah,
Hmm.
junior high uh, didn't have specific teams. We other than the
So
knock
more like
around after school.
pick up ball then.
Yeah. So organized happened at Hamilton, and I played on the B squad, and I never had the opinion that I was very good. I know I tried hard
Right.
and really liked playing. I don't know. I didn't like losing, but winning and losing wasn't the beginning and the end of my world there. You know,
Right.
uh, winning was nice. I could deal with that, but losing I didn't like, but it wasn't that important. Um, so I get to Hamilton and I participate in the B squad and I make the first string, and surprise, you know, to me. Um, so I kept at it and I was 5'9" in the ninth grade. And that's when I began to get a little more serious about paying attention to the what goes on in the game.
Right.
Not just running up and down,
Right.
but how to use a screen, how to position for rebounds. The next year, I grew to be 5'11", 6 feet, and I played varsity. And my coach was a guy named Shimizu. a little 5'6" Japanese man. And he taught me more about basketball than anybody ever since.
Mm,
He taught me how to screen for position. He said, because you're a skinny kid, he said, you need to get position because other guys will root you out if you don't. They'll just brush you aside. So I took that to heart. And I just thought that it was wonderful that I made the team. And the other guys perceived me differently, I guess. They were like, oh, all of a sudden I was starting. I started um, as a forward in um, the 10th grade, I mean, in the 11th grade and in the 12th grade. So I was a starting um, basketball player, and I still didn't know that I was any good.
right. You just know you were playing and you were improving your game.
Yes. And, I had a lot of moves, and there were moves that I would work on by myself, and I had a philosophy, an offensive philosophy that if I didn't shoot a lot of jump shots. I like to go to the hole. And what I would do driving is I would take what the defensive player gave me. In other words, if I drove as if I were going to make a left-hand layup and he went for that, then I'd switch to the right
Mm.
and vice versa. Or if I was going under the basket, I might turn around and come back on the other side.
So
And
you did have moves.
yes, uh, one of my friends told me one time, he said, man, you got more moves in a bowl full of jelly, jello. And I understood what he was saying, but that's just my game. That's
Right.
just the way I play. You can call it whatever you want. Arthur was the starting guard. He said, "Good game, man." And I said, "Thanks." I said, "I'm just glad we won. We did so and so." And he said, "You do know you scored 31 points, right?" And I said, "No. When did that happen?"
Mm.
You know. Um, and then uh, another game, he came up and congratulated me, and I said, "Why?" He said, "You set the school record for rebounds today." I had
Wow.
22 rebounds, and I was only 6'1", you know. Uh, but I was a scrapper,
So you
I wasn't the ball handler, but I could make it disappear. I was quick. I wasn't fast.
right.
Um, Adequate hops, but it's all about the positioning. It's about the focus. It's about one play at a time. And that's the way I played. I even played that way in the Army. When I went in the Army, I was on the battalion team there. And I was beginning to get an appreciation for what I brought to the game.
Hmm.
And I began to think, oh man, I might be able to go pro if I, really keep my, head focused. A typical
Right. Ball player. Like
ball player
everybody think that
attitude.
they'll make the pro. Ish, let me ask you, like, what kind of support did you get from your parents for your effort? Did they attend your game? Did they come and cheer you on?
My parents only went to one game that I played in, and that was at Cal State LA.
Mm,
However, having said that, they were both very supportive of what I was doing. They enjoyed that kind of because they were both workers. I mean,
right.
and Charles was really a hard worker and um, a good architect.
Hmm.
One of my friends who wanted to be an architect encountered some of his work, and he said, "Damn, your old man was one of the top ones in LA." But their focus, mom used to work at Bullock's downtown originally. So she'd have to catch the bus to go to work, catch the bus to come home,
Right.
prepare a meal. So I didn't expect their presence.
Right. Right. They were focused on raising a family,
Yes,
not attending your games.
yes, which was fine because we had a lot of students attending. There was always somebody.
What
Yeah,
about your brother? Did he play?
nope, my brother couldn't play dead, man. You know,
Did he attend your game? Was he supportive?
no,
He
my brother
wasn't
and I
interested.
weren't that close because he was 3 years older, and there was like I think there's real sibling rivalry there. I
Hmm.
used to try to impress him with sports, and he just,
He wasn't having it.
he wasn't having it. So, my support came from my friends, from my parents. My brother left home when he was 18,
Ah,
just went up north, and
you mean Northern California?
yeah, he
Okay.
actually worked for a while as a bracero, in the fields,
Hmm.
and that taught him a great lesson about work and work ethic. He told me later. He said, "Man, that was very hard." But I knew without them having to say so that my parents were extremely supportive. Now, what I
Hmm.
didn't know was that as I brought home my newspaper, the little Hamilton newspaper, my
Right. The
mother would
news
say
clips
clips. Yeah,
that they were saving them.
yeah. My mother, I have a whole album of clips that she saved from high school, JC, and the Army. The Stars and Stripes would put out, clips, and she saved those clips because, you know,
But of course, she was proud of her son. Come
yeah, but
on.
that never occurred to me
Yeah.
that she was doing that.
Right. You say she was stoic, so she might not express like her emotions like that.
That's
But
true.
that's evidence that
Uh-huh.
like she
Yeah.
cared
And
deeply.
when I was in the Army, I'll start there. When I was in the Army, I made like an all-star team, and I thought, well, I must be pretty good. I was averaging in the 20s, and one of the team that won the league they were entitled to select a player to go with them to participate in the championship. And out of all the rest of the league, they chose me to go with them.
Mm,
And as it turned out, I made one of the game-winning tip ins for that team, which was
hmm.
our rival, but for that team. And they were like, I knew we got this guy for a reason. So, turning point when I was in the Army, and that was my first year. Second year, I I had injured my knee in junior college, and back then they didn't know what an ACL was and all that. So I just let the swelling go down, and I'd wrap it and keep playing, and then it'd go out again. And when I got drafted, I told them I had this. I'm flat-footed, and I have this knee, and they said, "Oh, it'll be all right." Like, damn, because I thought they would give me, an exoneration of some sort, but no, they said, come on, we need you. So a big turning point was when my knee went out my second year, and I had to have the first of many knee operations. And that was on January 20. I was on my birthday in 1968. Now, as a result, the Army doctors messed up, and my
Mm,
knee, it got really swollen, and I got blisters from the cast and everything. And then so they had to go in again 7 days later.
wow.
So I had two knee operations like that, and I was in the hospital for 50 days. I lost 30 pounds,
Wow.
over 30 pounds in the hospital. I went in at 210. I think I came out at 178. Um, but during my rehab, my physical therapist, I asked him how long before I'll be able to play ball. He said, I don't think you're going to be able to play basketball with what they did, you know. And that was shocking.
Mm,
That was really shocking. Um, and I thought, oh man, so there go my dreams. All of what I thought I could do and
right. That you
be,
could make it to the NBA.
yeah, that was done. And I remember sitting, feeling sorry for myself, and then I kind of said, "Oh, whoa, wait a minute. if I'm not going to be able to play basketball, I need to put something between my ears. And I started reading. I just picked up a big, thick book. The name of the book was The Source by
Mm,
Michener. And I began, it was 1,200 pages, and it was a challenge. That was my challenge. And I've read ever since. So that was
mm,
the beginning I mean, that's a major shift from the way that I was living and how
right,
I began to become aware of
right.
things outside of my bubble.
Own little sphere.
Yes. So as it turned out, um, I played at Cal State LA that same year. I really worked my rehab and
Hmm.
got back into shape.
So
And
you had started to mention about Tark. So did
yeah,
you
I'm going
encounter
there.
Tark before you went to LA? Did you
Tar
encounter him on
Tarkanian
this?
Tarkanian was coaching at Cal State Long Beach. His team was the team to beat. We had an All-American on Cal State's team named Ron Knight, and he could put him up. But I wasn't the starter. I was the guy that come off the bench and
Right,
play
you're back
defense.
up.
Yeah, I played defense and get you some rebounds. And as a matter of fact, that first year I was the most inspirational. That's what the
Mm,
team awarded me. But Tarkanian had the team that the year after I finally left, he had Raymond Lewis on his team. He had God, Ed Ratliff, and these were incredible athletes, you know, uh, who went on to actually play pro.
right.
Some of them. Now, I didn't mention, but at LACC, I actually played against Lou Alcindor,
Hmm.
the when he was a freshman.
Freshman at UCLA.
Uh-huh. And that was an experience where uh, things happened on that court that I couldn't believe. Our
Yeah,
starting
and you
our
mentioned
starting
Lou Sindor, which he was then, but for your audience, you might want to remember them. That would become the Hall of Famer
Kareem
Kareem
Abdul-Jabbar.
Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah. And I actually made one shot over him. I was in the corner and he came flying out at me. And I mean, I shot the thing to the moon and it came
Mm,
down, boom. And he turned around and looked at me. Now, uh, this, these guys, and I actually have a picture of Sports Illustrated from that game. It's
ah,
where he's sitting on the cover holding his knee. And in the background, my father Charles, he
ah.
found this picture. He said, isn't that Jeep back there? You know, one kid, I think it's Tommy Heights, he's making a layup and I'm in the back, looking. But playing at Cal State LA was quite an experience,
Hmm.
especially playing against Tarkanian and, uh, other coaches in other colleges.
Did your experience playing ball, did it influence the trajectory of your life?
It had an influence on how my life needed to change.
Ah,
Um, because what I was about was partying, playing, and drinking. That's that was all
hmm.
that mishmash of, and I was living in it. And once again, I'm in my bubble, in my fast lane. I've been in the army and I've gotten out. I've learned a few things. Uh, I'm reading now, but I'm still
Mm,
playing ball and partying, and we're going out and doing this, that, and the other. Right after I got out of the army, I got two DUIs in 1 month, and I didn't know. This is how ignorant I was, unaware. I didn't know it was against the law to drink and drive because I did it in the army. That's all we did. Well, here in California, if you got busted drunk driving twice in a month, you had to go to jail.
Mm-hmm.
So and I thought, when I went to court, the guy says, okay, you have, uh, you can either pay this fine or you can spend 5 days in jail. And, I was living on the GI Bill and, I didn't want to ask my parents for money for something like that. Although I was staying at home because my mother said, as long as you're going to school,
Right.
you don't have to pay rent
You
here.
can stay home.
Yeah. So, I got into the Hooskow, and the first thing that happened was old black guy in there said, "Hey, welcome to Los Angeles. You're now a citizen." And I looked at him and I said, "What you mean?" He said, "You ain't a citizen in Los Angeles if you're black until you've been to jail." And I said, "Oh my goodness." And then I thought, well, I only got 5 days. This ain't gonna be a big deal. But as it turned out, there was a woman I knew that was working down there, and she said, "Oh, you're gonna miss Cheryl's wedding." And I said, "No, I'll be out in 5 days. I'll be able to make it." She said, "Nope, you'll be here for 20 days." And I said, "Oh man, why?" She said, "Because you got arrested twice in 1 month. That's an automatic 20 days." So I've been to jail for 20 days, and this was right after I finished playing ball, my eligibility. I was still on the GI Bill, but I was knocking
Right.
around. I didn't have a major, I didn't have any direction. And I had a friend, Ulysses, he's my best friend. He said, Ish, why? I'm gonna tell you a story about Ulysses too. He said, "Why don't you um, take the test for group supervisor?" He said, "I know you don't, in order to be a DPO, you have to have your degree." He said, "But you can try this out. You always said you'd like to work with kids." And that came about because of probation officers that visited my high school and my junior college classes. And I
Right.
still have the notes from one of them that came. Um,
So is that like during career day or something?
yeah, it's
Right,
like
right.
they had police officers and probation officers, and they'd come and talk about what they did. And now in high school, I was terrified that I'd wind up behind a desk in a cubicle,
Mm.
you know, for 8 hours a day. You know, I didn't want, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, but all the rest of the kids, they knew that they wanted to be a doctor. They knew that they wanted to be this or that. And I didn't have any idea. But
You just didn't want to be caught behind a desk.
yes, but I remembered that guy showing up. And I remember him talking about working with kids, and that kind of planted the seed. And Ulysses and I had talked about it. Um, and made the suggestion to take the test.
Cut
So
that out.
Ulysses uh, said that they had this job opening as group supervisor in the probation department, and that if I took the test, I might qualify. I said, okay, I'll try that. And I went down and I took the test because, my education was that some of it took root. You know what I mean? I knew how to read, I knew how to process information.
Right.
You know, um, I just didn't know what was going on. When you come into the Army, they give you a battery of tests, and it's just crazy making. And what they are is they give you these tests to determine your GT score, which is like IQ.
Hmm.
And I said, well, hell, I know how to read and all that. And in order, they approached me to join ADM because I was just knocking around. I was in Signal and I was stoking the boilers and playing ball and all that. And they said, well, in ADM, you don't have to do KP. You don't have to do guard duty. And I said, well, sign me up. How do I get to that? And they said, well, you have to have a GT score of 115. And I said, do I have that? And the guy that was asking me was a guy that was a good friend. He tilted his head to the side and he said, "Ish, you actually have the highest GT score in the battalion." And he said, that's why they're coming after you. And I thought, Ulysses gave me the time to show up and take the test. Now, just so you know, in our partying, Ulysses and I and Xavier used to party together. And if we were introducing ourselves to a young lady and she asked our name, they would never believe it because she'd say, what's your name? My name is Ishmael, and you are Ulysses. And what's your name? My name is Xavier. And they said, no, how you
John.
get all these? How did you guys land together? You know.
Yeah.
So I took the test and I passed it, which is why I alluded to what went on in the service that I could take tests.
Right.
And the turning point came in the interview. In that interview, there was a white gentleman who seemed genuinely pleased to see me. He shook my hand and he said, you passed the exam and this, that, and the other. And he said, it really pleases to see me, to see you here. He said, because this is a good time for you people. And now this is the crossroads. Now, the crossroads is, do I take umbrage and address this man out of my own sense of anger and black power, as it were?
Right.
Or do I take him at face value, recognizing that he's not trying to be offensive? He just
Right.
didn't know any better. He doesn't know any better, and he is actually offering something.
Giving you an opportunity.
Yes. And then I sat there and I was like, uh-huh, yeah, thank you, I think. And then he says, uh, can you drive? Do you have a car? And now he's working my nerve, And I said, yes, yes, and I can. And he said, oh, good. He said, so you don't mind driving, kind of a far distance to work? And I said, no, not really. And then he said, can you start this Thursday?
He's
And
ready to go.
I said, yes, I can. And so he gave me the directions, all of that, right after insulting me in my
Right, right,
point
right,
of view.
right. In your sensitive mind.
Yes, because I was just learning how to be black, black power and all that.
Yeah.
Because
How
of
dare he ask if you drive and if you have a car?
yeah, and yeah, and then I go to work. Now, I got a fro that's out here, and I'm wearing a pull down fedora when I show up to work. And my coworker, the guy that I will be working nights with, uh, I meet him in the office, and the supervisor says, this is Chuck. You guys will be working together. So Chuck will take you up to the dorm and, show you the layout and how you have to work with the kids. Now, in on my way up, I kind of stepped off the curb and kind of stumbled. And Chuck was uh, trying to make a little funny. Chuck is white, by the way. He's trying to make a little funny remark. And he says, you've been walking long, my man. And I looked at him to sure-footedness. And he said, oh, and he told me later what he thought. He said, there goes that old thing about judging a book by its cover, you know. Because he thought, I was just going to be, because he's working with another black guy that was they didn't get
Right,
along. And so he just kind of naturally said, oh Lord, here
right.
I am with another one. And we got along great, but that was my first experience working in camp. Now, that was a great transition that got me into the department.
Hmm.
Then I'm working in the department for maybe, this is after the earthquake, for maybe 6 months to a year. And and I'd stay over and I'd run around the track and I'd play with,
Which
and I was still working nights. And I enjoyed working nights. I was working nights and going to school kind of off and on during the day until I met Sam Hankerson. And Sam would stay up and we'd chat, you know. And I'd say, Sam, I said to him, I said, Sam, uh, I don't see you very often. When do you work? And he says, oh, I work a 56-hour shift. And I was working 5 days a week, 5 nights a week, and going to school during the day and playing ball at the same time. And he said, I said, what is that? What is a 56-hour shift? And he said, I come to work on Tuesday and I go home on Thursday. I come to work Tuesday at 6 and I go home Thursday at 2. And I said, what? I said, how do I get to do that? He said, you have to have a degree. I said, oh. Now I don't even have a major declared yet. And I said, and I knew immediately that that's what I wanted to do. I enjoyed working with the kids, even working nights. I
Right.
said, but I knew immediately that's what I
You
wanted.
wanted the 56-hour shift.
That's right. So the next week, I went to Cal State and declared my major. I majored in Spanish.
Oh,
So
that's a surprise. That's a curveball.
uh,
To use a
I
sports metaphor.
I had taken Spanish in junior high, the ninth grade in junior high, and in all through high school. I was rather embarrassed because I didn't remember much of it. I remembered the Pledge of Allegiance and things like that, but I didn't really know much. So I
Right.
think this is an opportunity for me to really learn to speak Spanish. Now, the guys that I was hanging with and doing my number with, they all were like, what are you gonna do with that? And their idea was to take poli-sci social classes and get degrees in those fields.
Right.
And I said, yeah, but what is that? When you graduate, what is that? What have you done? What does that sociology look like?
Right. Our political science, our
Yeah,
history.
yeah. What does that look like? He said, no, we need to get through the educational process so we can get into the workforce.
Right. You
And
need a degree.
yeah. Now I need a degree, but my driving force, as they asked me that, they said, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to be able to speak Spanish. And so that when someone asks me, why did you go to college? I won't have that vague thing to refer to. I'll say I went to college to learn how to speak Spanish.
Mm.
And that's what I did. So,
Hey, and you're in Southern California, man.
not that I was that aware.
Right.
I was personally driven to learn how to speak Spanish because I was embarrassed at having wasted my time in high
It,
school.
it,
I had a good accent, and I still do, but I didn't apply myself. I had to play basketball, don't you know?
right.
So that was my thinking. So that's another turning point. When I met Sam, and he said 56-hour shift, he turned on that light switch. There are those times that I remember. I
Right.
can actually say, oh, my life took an actual shift.
When did you first feel like yourself? Like when did you know that this is the ish that I want to be?
I think I was in the probation department, and it wasn't, huh. I knew I was a good PO,
Mhm.
and I knew that I was getting to be who I wanted to be, and that took a period of
How
time.
long were you working as a probation officer by then?
I want to say 2 or 3 years. Now,
Okay.
see, there are some awareness things that happen, and Joe was part of it. Joe Nunn. Joe was I think, he was my first supervisor.
Hmm.
And I landed at Camp Gonzales in 1974. And we just worked the line for at least a year. That meant that I'd come to work at 2 and go home at 10. And then I'd go hit the bars and party. and come back at 2 o'clock the next afternoon. We did that for a while, and then they began to introduce casework, which was a foreign concept to me. I knew how to
Hmm.
get, I knew how to deal and banter with the kids because
Right,
they were just the kids that I grew up with, really, And that cat kid act like Bernard, man. I know what's going on with him. But casework was another thing. Uh,
right,
really had to get down and find out about the family, talk to this kid, and write up your weekly notes.
right.
Well, I was largely unconscious about the process and going through it and what my role would be, And Joe said, uh, just so you guys know, he said, I'm going to be auditing your files to make sure your paperwork is correct and that you're,
You're doing
keeping
your
your
case
weekly
notes.
notes. Yeah, I hadn't been doing anything. If you open my file, it was just there. I didn't have any notes. I had the blue sheet. But what I did have, and I had a memory at that point that was, I could tell you verbatim what happened and when it happened
Right.
to kids. And so I went and, I had little notes and things, I went and I created, uh, under each kid, I created all my notes. And Joe, uh, came back the next week after he supposedly had conducted his audit. And he says to me, Ish, you ever think about writing a book? And I said, hell no. Why? And he said, I did the audit last week. And you didn't have anything. And then he said, and now you have the entire history
Mm.
or
The
encounter
full
with this kid.
narrative, eh?
Uh-huh. You have the whole thing down here. And he said, did you make that? Did you make that up? I said, nope. I said, I just remembered it. That's kind of the way I do it. And that was another little light bulb about
Mm.
responsibility, about procrastination, about actually taking this seriously.
Mm.
The other thing was a woman named Ellen Koch, who was one of his caseworkers. As she left, she wrote me a glowing recommendation because of the casework that I was doing. And that started with Joe, you know.
Right.
Now, I began to really move outside of the bubble.
Hmm.
Uh, the little internal things that were going on inside the bubble at camp show up, and that was that. And then you go party, and you come back, and you show up, and you do that, and that was that. Was after the strike in 1981,
Hmm.
and in 1981, we actually won the strike and forced them to come back to the table. But I didn't know
And
what
by we, you're referring to
the
the,
union and the probation department.
the probation union. Okay.
Yeah. Now, I wasn't a member of the union. I was still in my bubble, but everybody that I knew was affected somehow. Now, I wasn't because I had had 4 years as a night man, as a GSN,
Mm.
prior to becoming a DPO. So I wasn't affected because I had the seniority, but everybody else was in some way. And I saw how devastating it was for people to get demoted and transferred because of the strike, which was brought about by Proposition 13. And that you
Oh,
guys,
right. The tax as
because the truth is, it just wasn't any money.
right.
And but I made a decision at that point that I'm going to have to pay attention to what's going on because I don't want to ever be in a position of having a decision made where I didn't know what was happening. So
Hmm.
there's a crack in my bubble at that point. And I had met my wife at that time also. Um,
So
although,
I want to hold, I want you to hold that thought because when we come back from the break, we're
Hmm.
going to talk about some of those early influences. And while this is not early, I'm sure meeting your wife is also one of the influences that has affected your trajectory. Uh,
Uh-huh.
so we'll want to talk about people and places or moments that kind of help you to be the man that you became.
This is my sixth grade class, the one I talked to you about.
Right. Welcome back.
Okay.
And as we move to the next segment where we talk about early influences, the question to you is which people, places, or moments most shaped the man you became? And talk to us. And the follow-up that I'll have that I'll kind of put out there is, what did you learn from your parents, from elders, from coaches, or community leaders? You mentioned people like Dr. Joe Nunn,
Hmm.
who was one of your supervisors. And please, any specific story that still guides you from these early days, that guide your life even today, share it with us.
Let's see, we were talking about Joe. There was another, I had another mentor
Mm-hmm.
at Camp Gonzalez, and his name was Phil Stein, and he was the director.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Phil believed in sports, and he believed that if you use sports, you could use it as a tool to help the kids become more involved in the mainstay of society. In
Mm-hmm.
other words, we had a basketball team in camp that used to go out and play in schools, high schools,
Mm-hmm.
and then the kids would come back to incarceration. Now, he wanted the kids to be able to experience and feel what the mainstream was like
Mm-hmm.
instead of just gang banging, you know, instead of just opting out of school. Now, in order to participate, you had to get good grades in school and you
Right.
had to have acceptable behavior. Now, at this point, um, I'm just getting into the casework and I don't particularly like the
Mm.
idea. I don't like
Right.
the shift that I'm on. I'm working uh, on the weekends because they need my strength in controlling the kids. That's a strength thing
Right.
where you get taken advantage of because you're good.
Right. You're an athlete, so you should be able to manage the
Yeah.
boys.
Well, and I did. I have on a couple of occasions I have had supervisors actually say they'd never seen anyone better in the dorm, in terms of uh, confronting, setting expectations, being consistent with the kids, and actually liking them.
Right.
Um, at this time, Phil calls me into his office and he says, "I want to get a basketball game, a basketball team going." And I'm thinking, yeah, I don't need any additional work assignment, you know. Uh, and he says to me, he says, I thought maybe you and Tree, Trinier Woodland is the other guy. He said, I thought maybe you and Tree would select a team and figure out a schedule and see where we could have the guys participate. And I'm, looking at him like, yeah, right, and I'm working uh on the weekends and I'm going to devote my, spare time. And he says, now, if you choose to do this, he said, I'd be willing to make some concessions, like give you whatever shift you want. I said,
Mm.
oh, so what where should I select the kids from?
You're ready to go.
Yeah, let's do it. And I saw then that he was a man that had integrity, and he had an idea that he wanted to put forth and was willing to do what needed to be done to have that happen. The other thing with Phil was in '83, I stopped drinking. My wife, yeah, we'll kind of get to that. She was a large influence in my life, probably the greatest
Hmm.
influence in my life in terms of saving my life. But in '83, I stopped drinking and I was going to AA. There was a group down the street from the camp at in Malibu. And I told Phil that uh, I have a drinking problem and I want to address it and I want to attend AA on at the only meeting they had was at 8 o'clock Monday night, which was the shift that I was working. And I said, and I would be willing to use my holiday or vacation time to let that happen, to make that happen. And he sat back and he said, I didn't know that this was a problem for you. And I said, my wife is a doctor of psychology, and she said she had told me that I'm a functional alcoholic, and I relayed that to him, and I said it doesn't mean that I'm drinking at work. I said it means that I'm drinking away from work,
Right.
able to function here. I said, but I need to get a handle on the problem. And he said, okay. He said, but I tell you what, he said, you're not going to use your time. He said, that's some time that we will swallow. He said, we'll take that because I think that is time well spent, better than you just actually being in the late dorm.
Hmm.
That was extremely important in terms of him being able to process that information and him being supportive in that way.
Right. Right. Where the
Uh,
job is offering you the support.
right. And he is the reason that I promoted to supervisor because I was comfortable at that point. When
Right.
I
Just
was
working the
comfortable,
line.
I had more seniority than anybody at the camp. I had Christmas and New Year's off every year if I wanted it. I was at the top of that pay grade. And so I didn't really need
Right.
to be a supervisor for because I needed to. I want to be a director. I want to, not my ego.
Right. 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 Right.
So this was not an ego thing, but Phil had in his mind. He said, "I think you'll be a good supervisor." And he said, "So are you just taking the test just to see what's going on?" And I said, "No, I'll accept something if I think it's appropriate." He said, "Well, what if I told you I needed you to go to accept a position at in Santa Monica at a field office?" And I said, I'd take it. And he said, but I thought you said you don't want to go to the field. And I said, I don't. Uh, he said, but why would you take that if you don't want to go there? And I said, because I don't think you do anything that would harm me.
Mm.
And he said, well, what if I told you I needed you at Camp Kilpatrick? And I said, I'd go, same argument. And he said, okay, I need you at Kilpatrick. And that's where I was promoted. And I was promoted over the wishes of the director that was there. He wanted somebody else, but Phil said, okay, but you're going to take Moran, you're going to take Ish. So that was another mentor
Hmm.
that I had developed. Now, we had started talking about the strike and its impact on the staff and the environment
Right.
and
Right.
me personally, and I said that I had met my wife that at that point she had been a volunteer under Joe from Pepperdine in her program, her master's program. And she worked at the camp in a casework kind of situation, and I knew her there. but I didn't say anything until she left, and then we got together. Now, while I was uh, immediately after the strike, the guy who had been the camp steward was leaving, and he asked me if I would take over the situation, over the position,
Mm-hmm.
because we wouldn't have a union steward. And I said, sure, I'll do it. And I was developing one of my philosophies of life at that point. It was just starting, and that was kind of the start of it. And that
Mm-hmm.
philosophy is I will try to do anything that anybody genuinely asks of me. If it's a genuine request,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and do whatever that is. Okay, and that's just kind of the way I began to approach things. So I became
Right.
the union steward. And as the union steward, I would go down to the meetings. And at first, I was astounded by how much was going on in the department, how many different facets, and how much had to be done,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Uh, and I did that for maybe a year, no, maybe less. But then one of the women asked me, Ish, we don't have a camp's vice president, and we'd like you to consider being the camp's vice president of the union and a member of the board, the executive board. I thought, ah, man, you know, but it was a genuine ask. It was coming from the right place.
And your philosophy was taking shape.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the kind of thing, okay, it's okay to say that, but now what you gonna do?
Right. How
Yeah,
do you act when the opportunity presents itself?
yeah. So I became the camp's VP, and that thrust me into a different limelight. I had to
Mm-hmm.
encounter uh, people at different workplaces, at different points of view, at different trainings and things like that, negotiations for contracts for staff. And so I began to become aware
Mm-hmm.
of how the department works, how it works, and kind of what my position was in the department. Now, what I told you that I wasn't really all that interested in becoming a supervisor
Right.
or a director, which meant that I was largely able to say what needed to be said in a public forum without being threatened.
Right.
Okay. So I'd get up and I'd tell it like it is. This is the way it's going. This is the way it is. And now what are we going to do about it? And they used to put out a little paper, and they had a little paper with my picture in it, say it's just telling it like it is, and da 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 da, which was not really my intent, but it was my intent. My intent
Mm.
wasn't the notoriety. My intent was the message for how staff were being treated, for how staffing patterns determined the way we were able to treat kids. So I'm camp's VP for the next 5 years. And then comes the time for promotion. That was 1990. Um, in the interim, I mentioned that I'd met Karen and that she and I didn't mention it, but she had done an intervention with the drinking,
Mm-hmm.
and that was very. I remember almost sweating in that intervention because people were telling you how they felt about you,
Mm.
which was uncomfortable for me. And we left the intervention, and I asked the guy, I remember asking the guy that was conducting it, um, he said, we could treat you on an outpatient kind of program. And I said, how much would that cost? And he said, about $900, you know, for that treatment. And I didn't, I didn't let on what I thought about it. I just kind of nodded, said, okay. And after the intervention, Karen and I were walking to the car, and she said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I'm okay." I said, "But I wanna see if I can understand this." I said, "That guy wants me to pay him $900 so I can stop drinking?" And she said, "Yeah, that's kind of the way it goes." I said, "How about I do it and maybe go to AA for a year and see how that works. And if I can do that, then."
Right.
And that's what I did. I went to AA for a year, and I found at the end of a year that the meetings, what I was encountering were people who were using the meetings as a substitute crutch for the alcohol. And I thought I didn't want that to be my life. I didn't
Right.
want to drink, and I wanted to be in control of that. And so I had the AA behind me. I understood what I needed to do. So that was it for me.
And
The-
and and did you stop drink permanently then?
yeah, that was
Okay.
1980. My last drink was October 5th, 1982. In 1983, Karen said to me, she said, "You're smoking more now." She said, "Why don't you just see if you can not smoke for the rest of tonight?" You think I can't? And I had been reading up on that, and I knew that if you get past the first 72 hours, it gets easier. And that was the last cigarette I smoked.
Mm.
So, uh, 1983 was a turning point. 82, 83 was a real turning point, and that influence comes from Karen because
Who are other big influences in your life that helped to make you the person you are today?
that was one of them.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
major.
Yeah, because I can't be that person and still be doing what I was doing, the drinking and the smoking. And
Right.
I also stopped eating meat in 83. Um, so my identity is really forming now as a counselor. I'm becoming more and more proficient in that arena in
Hmm.
terms of treating kids as a union steward or
Right.
voice
Hmm.
in the department. That's beginning to take shape at that point. The mentors and then after after I got promoted, I became camp's VP for the supervisors union, and then I became chair of the supervisors union after that. Now I know who I am.
Hmm.
I know who I am in the department. I have a voice that says I'm going to do what's right for the kids and what's right for my staff. You may not agree with it. My job is to be able to say what I need to say in a tactful manner that you'll be able to understand it.
Hmm.
So I my thing was I should be able to say anything I need to say with tact. Whether
Right.
you agree with it or not is fine. We can manage that. And that happened in staff training, and that happened in all of the arenas. I became, as chair of the union, I also became chair of the COD committee, which is the Committee on Organizational Diversity,
Mm.
which is another voice in the department that was needed. And that's where I worked with Jerry Teo and Vanessa Cromwell, something. But we worked with them because they were social workers and they were there to guide us in
Right.
how to do assessments, how to be able to articulate what really needed to be articulated, and say it with conviction and not be vindictive with it. And the assessment was this is what's interesting. We'd go to a facility and we'd ask questions
Hmm.
of the staff. We'd ask their questions and then we'd collate that information and and then give it back to them. Invariably, they would be pissed off. And because we would go back out after we'd done our written assessment, we'd go back out and talk to them about what our assessment was. And I was
Right.
always one that if you need to go talk to these people, because they're pissed. I said, that's okay. They ain't gonna do nothing. Um, but I would tell them that, I didn't make this stuff up.
Right. It's the information that they gave, that they provided.
Yes. I said, you told me this.
Right.
And then we could start to work on it.
Hmm.
Um, and it was important, but it's by now I have that identity pretty much in place, and I can go anywhere and I can function in any capacity in the department with
Right.
chief probation officer, with the bureau chiefs. They all knew me
Right.
as
Right.
Ish. They knew me as Ish. Not even Ish Moran or Ishmael Moran. All of them just call me Ish.
The issue was your identity, your personality.
Now, in 1984, I was playing kind of in pickup ball, and I ruptured my Achilles tendon. So I was out, and Karen says to me, after I had gone through my rehab and I was getting around, she says, "Why don't you, because you keep getting injured, trying to play basketball and doing all this other stuff, why don't you take yoga with me?" And I thought, yoga? What are we gonna do? What do you do? Because my whole thing, my thought about yoga was just, I didn't know there was
Yeah.
hatha yoga that means movement that had all these positions, these associated with it. So she took me to Judy Narvik was my first instructor. She's an Iyengar teacher. She took me to that class. Sylvester, I thought I was in shape. That class kicked my ass 7 ways to
Mm.
Sunday. I mean, sweat was popping off of me. My arms were shaking. I was like trying to hold warrior. I was like, what is
Yeah,
all
you think you were all that, eh?
Yeah, in a bag of chips. I didn't have but a single chip in my bag, man. But I walked away thinking, I'm not taking that ass whipping. You know, I'm going back
You
and
love the challenge.
yes, I'm once again, the challenge is there. This something it resonates. This is something I think I need to see if I can do. And I stayed with it with her for about 6 or 7 years. And then I met a guy named Steve Ross who became my guru. Now there's another identity coming in now.
Hmm.
I've got I'm pretty established as Ish in the probation department, and who I want to be is that pop, who I want to be there. So now there is another one coming in. And I have been practicing yoga, and I think I'm a yoga student. And there is a community. There is a probation community, and now there is a yoga community that is
Hmm.
developing, where we go on retreats together and talk about yoga and its influence on our lives.
So let me ask you a
And
question,
mhm.
Ish, because
Yeah, and see, well, I have yoga pictures. I'll send you some of those. Joe. He always knew I when I got into yoga, and he was just kind of like, how do you get into all of that ish. But I began to teach yoga. This guy Steve, he asked me to sub for him one week, and I subbed for him, and then he said, the students tell me I need to put you on the program. So then I became a yoga instructor in
how long
95.
ago
That was in
was that?
95.
Are you still teaching
Yeah.
yoga?
Yeah,
Okay.
I taught in class yoga instruction for I'd say 25 years until the pandemic hit. I was teaching at one, two, three. I was teaching at 4 different studios at one time. you know.
Wow.
Um, so I was a good teacher in that I taught a class that was fully vinyasa flow with music and Iyengar based instruction, which which meant that I was hands-on in terms of how to put you in the correct position,
Mm-hmm.
how to describe the position that you're moving into, and what triggers your body should be experiencing. Now, if you weren't experiencing that trigger, then I would move you into that position uh, safely.
Wow. That's just fascinating there. As I move to turning points
Mhm.
in your life, and you have spoken to like a lot of this because you know the situation with your wife's intervention, with Karen's intervention, definitely
Mhm.
turning point. The conversation with your probation officer manager,
Oh,
turning
yeah.
point.
Well,
Are
one
there
thing I want to stop you right there because there was something else that Phil said to me
sure,
that was really, really important. And I see it playing out over and over again in life. And he
right? Which is
said,
the question I was gonna ask. Any
uh-huh.
specific story that kind of guides you today? So that's exactly where you're going.
He said, Ish said, as you go through the department, you're going to find that first class managers will hire and promote first class people. They will bring those people to them because they're looking for that kind of product. He said, also, what you're going to find is that second class managers are going to hire and promote third class people because of their fear of their ego and being shown up.
Mm,
And that continued to play out in the department. Which is part of the reason that the department is actually in the position it's in today, because they have hired and promoted exactly the wrong kind of people because you had a second class manager in the first place.
hiring third class people.
Yes. And that stuck with me. And now, when I look at our political situation today,
Hmm.
that same dynamic is being played out. We have a second class chief promoting and hiring third class people. That's how we get this kakistocracy that we're looking at, you know.
So that's a fascinating thought. And I know historians and politicians and social scientists will grapple with these larger questions for generations to
For
come.
generations, yes, yes.
So, just thinking of turning point, and you've really covered this question, but I want you to say it. Um, what were the biggest turning points or crossroads in your life? And how did you change direction? And you know, I know the drinking thing must be high here.
Hmm.
You have spoken to this, so I still want you to just mention it briefly, and talk about how you change direction. But here's the one I want you to focus on. What kind of risk did you take, and what did you leave behind?
Okay, we'll start with that drinking.
Hmm.
The alcohol for me lowered my inhibitions so that I could interact socially without thinking about what somebody was thinking about me or, because the truth is I'm basically and have been shy all my life, and alcohol would bring lower the inhibitions so that I could interact freely. And Okay, so I was talking about the loss of inhibitions, which allowed me to interact.
Mm-hmm.
My fear was that I wouldn't be a very interesting person without it. And I had to be willing to accept that that's who I would be,
Mm-hmm.
so that was a significant change. It also showed me that I can do this.
Right.
I can do whatever I want, really want. Now, like I say, Karen has created significant suggestions which turn
Mm-hmm.
out to be life altering. She said to me, I think you have a green thumb. Now, she's talking to a guy from the city who, you know, is a party going, this, that, and the other. So I thought she was trying to insult me. And she said, no, no, plants just seem to grow around you, la da da da. I said, yeah, right. Well, there is a seed that was planted. And now, if you look at my house, my garden,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I planted all of the roses, I planted all of the fruit trees, everything that's here, I planted and pruned.
Please take a short video and to share with me that I'll just slot in right in this
Okay.
section here, just to
Okay.
show
I think, hmm.
the prophet speaking about your green thumb or the prophetess.
And I have a picture where we're in the backyard where you can see how the overgrown and just dilapidated it is when we first got here, and what it looks like now.
Hmm.
Um, and it's back to that thinking of being in the moment. Each each I'm task oriented, so each task has its completion. So
Hmm.
Karen bought me the house used to have all these goofy trees around it, and Karen bought me a 13-inch chainsaw, electric chainsaw for Christmas one year. And I cut down all the trees and dug up all the stumps and removed all the rocks so that I could put what I wanted
Hmm.
in the ground.
Put your stamp on it.
Yeah. Now, this is not, I can't do this if I'm not working a 56-hour shift.
Right.
So that's
It's all connected.
yeah. So Sylvester, what I call it is going with the flow of my life.
Hmm.
Um, if I go, everything that has happened that I've described has a flow to it.
Mm.
I have gone with it, rather than digging my heels and fighting the direction, the suggestion, um, from Joe to Phil to Karen to Steve Ross, Judy Narbit, all of these people that have changed who I was within the department, within life, and my
Hmm.
outlook on life. You know, um,
So, Ish, it sounds as if you've left a lot behind. And, I know one of the question I ask is, because I'm going to move to the next part about manhood responsibility and values, but what did you leave behind that you almost like you felt the urge to take with you, but you still left it behind?
basketball.
Basketball.
I when I ruptured my Achilles tendon, I didn't pick up another basketball. I mean, no, that's not true. I continued to try to play, and then I started doing 5Ks, started running. But when I got into yoga, I really had put the basketball down.
Mm.
And
And I know that has to be big because that sounds like volleyball to me. I
Hmm.
used to travel with a volleyball in my car and short, so if I see the game, I stop and
Yeah,
play.
yeah.
And I reached the point where I realized that I was
Hmm.
at a hotel in Jamaica and they're playing on the beach, and I went down there and I still have the serve. But
Hmm.
when I went to the room later that night, it felt as if somebody had used a 2x4 and beat
Uh-huh.
me from head to toe. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I just had to just stop.
It's that pounding. It's
Yes,
pounding. Because gravity. So
it does.
I had to put the basketball down as part of my identity
Mm-hmm.
and leave it. I had to put certain fair weather friends
Mm,
down and leave them until they could catch up with who I became. Yeah, and the influential person in my life was a stepfather. And like I said, he was reliable, he was responsible, he was there. He also had a drinking problem, but he was there consistently in
mm-hmm.
my eyes. What I saw from him was who I wanted to be, not consciously,
Right.
but internally. So
Mm,
uh, I get drafted, and I'm thinking I'll go to the Air Force or the Marines. And he stopped and he set me down. He said, "Wait, wait, come here. I want to talk to you." And whenever he did that, that meant that I needed to pay attention.
mm-hmm.
And he said, "Okay, so the idea is you don't want to go to Vietnam, am I correct?" And I said, "Absolutely." He said, "But do you know that the Marines and the Air Force are in Vietnam with as much presence as the Army?" And he said, "So going into the Air Force doesn't mean you're not going to Vietnam."
Mm,
And he said, "And it also means," and he said, "and correct me if I'm wrong," he said, "it also means that you spend 2 more years in the service." And I'm thinking you don't want to go to the service at all. And I said, "That would be correct." And he changed my thinking with that one conversation so that I was able to bite the bullet and say, "Okay, Specialist Moran reporting for duty." He,
So, so this leads us to this section and about manhood, responsibility, and values.
Mhm.
What did being a man mean to you at different time, different ages, and how has that evolved?
Okay, being a man did not occur to me until I got out of the service and began to think about the consequences of war. Thinking in my 20s and teens and 20s and 30s, I don't think I had a real idea of what being a man was all about, except what my father was.
Mm,
Manhood began, I think, even my it's in my teens, 20s, and 30s, I was all about that party life.
hmm
Basketball was my identity. Partying was my go-to. I even got married in 72 because I was too immature not to. And it occurred to both of us about a year into the marriage that this is not something we supposed to be doing together.
mm,
And we divorced amicably. I mean, I never felt like I owned anybody. You know what I mean?
right.
Uh, my search in life has been was at that point, and it has been to find a mate, not someone who's subservient or someone I felt subservient to,
hmm
but someone who was my equal. And I did that. I was fortunate in that. Now, becoming a man really happens when Karen and I get together, and she's got 2 children, and the rent is due. And you've got to make decisions that benefit someone other than yourself.
Yourself.
And from that point on, I had I had to assume the mantle of stability, responsibility, and manhood. The growing up process the striving and claiming to be a man had to change. You became that when you did that. Okay. When you put down, what is it? Yeah. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I played
That time of
childish things.
man put away childish things. Yeah.
Yeah. You and all of this process that we're talking about, the drinking, the putting down the basketball, those were my childhood identities, my adolescent identities. Then I had to find out, who am I? Becoming a yoga instructor
Mm-hmm.
was another part of that shift. Even when I uh, taught teacher training, I would teach them how to touch
Right.
other people uh, because touching somebody with the hand can be misconstrued. So I would tell them to use things like your hip, inner edge of your arm.
Instead of the palm.
Yes, not the palm. I said the palm can get into the mind of the student
Right.
in a way that's not conducive to what you're trying to focus on. So when I say hands on, it's actually body on.
Right. It's like a figure of speech.
Yeah.
So,
Uh,
so, so, Ish, let me ask you here, just thinking about struggles, resilience, and healing. I want you to think this one through. What has been the hardest season of your life, and what helped you to get through it?
well, operations have been difficult because everything else, you know, and it's funny, Sylvester, struggle for me is part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And greatest struggle was the initial struggle, the first operation, the
Mm-hmm.
first knee operation. That that created an a complete shift in what I thought I was going to do, what I was going to be able to do, and then now what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was a struggle. I mean, I've had, I don't know, over the years, maybe 16 operations, you know.
Mainly knee.
Knee, I've had both hips replaced. I'm a cancer survivor. I've had prostate surgery.
Mm.
I've had shoulder surgery, the torn Achilles. I mean, all of those things are injuries as far as I'm concerned. And the healing process for me has to occur here with acceptance of what that is.
Hmm. So what has helped you through all of this? And who stood by you like through this? And was it therapy or community or mentorship or faith? What has it been that has taken you through this?
Okay, the yoga philosophy of being present, being in the moment, moment to moment, is important to me. The focus that requires moves me out of, oh, ain't it awful? And all I need to manage is now. I
So
don't,
being present in the moment, no,
yeah.
in the no.
All I need to manage is right now. Now, my wife is extremely supportive, as have been my parents as I've gone through these surgeries. But Karen, I tell you that I'm not a whiner. When it comes to healing, I'm just kind of let me focus moment to moment on my healing, on my, do what the doctor said. That's just my approach. It's a struggle, but it's what needs to
Is
happen.
it hard for you to ask for help?
I'd say yes, because I don't do it very often.
Hmm.
I, it is not, I don't ask for help for my sake.
Hmm.
It's, I would ask for anybody, I'd get on the phone. Hey, so and so, what you doing? I got this going on, can you help me with this, that, and the other? So professionally, I had no qualms about.
So it was easy for you to ask for help professionally. So what about personally? Like when you were in pain and you wanted to share or to express, like the cancer came or the hip, and you might even be like just saying like really one more. Uh, like was it hard for you to connect with somebody to talk about it, like a friend, like outside of your wife, for example, or your
No,
parents?
and see, that's also part of kind of the way I was in the department and the way I managed myself in yoga with their teachings. It's I don't really have secrets, and it's not difficult to share anything. You know,
Mm,
I can remember um, when I had been diagnosed with kind of a aggressive form of prostate cancer. I was at work. I had gotten the diagnosis, and we were kind of talking at work, and I had mentioned, yeah, that, to my staff as we were taking a break, that, I had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, so I might, have to take some time off and this, that, and the other. They were asking me questions about how I feel, how I manage it. And I said, I'm going to try and make decisions that allow me to continue to live. And
mm,
one of the staff looked over at me. His name's Kurt. He said, Ish, he said, he said, you seem awful calm and cavalier, kind of like about having cancer. He said, if it was me, I would be bouncing off of these walls, wondering what to do. And I said, well, there's not a whole lot to do but listen to the doctor, follow instructions, and control myself.
lead me to this next section here to talk about community and belonging. How has your relationship with community changed from your youth to now? And what do you regard as community, especially now?
Okay. I had, remember, I lived in my bubble, and
Right,
my bubble was my community. Those were the
right,
kids that I grew up with, not necessarily, it wasn't the kids that I went to school with per se, because they
right.
were outside of the bubble. That was not a it was not a community for me. Probation became a community,
Mm-hmm,
and specifically Camp Gonzalez and Camp Kilpatrick, two very important communities
mm-hmm,
for me. So important that 40 years later, I'm still in contact with the friends that I
mm,
met in probation department and Gonzalez. Joe is one of those, and I just sent Joe a picture of three other guys that I just met that was at Gonzalez at the same time. And then there are the staff from Kilpatrick, you
mm-hmm.
know. So those are communities. Now, the closest thing to the type of community you're talking about is Topanga.
And what's Topanga?
That's where I live.
Okay.
And Topanga traditionally was like a hippie community or a commune kind of thing, where artists lived and musicians and actors were all up in here, and very creative community. Now, Karen was born here,
Mm.
has lived here in Topanga all her life. Well, most of her life. She left a couple of times.
So you got engrafted into the
Yes.
community.
Yeah, so I'm an immigrant, into this community, and I'm not super involved in it
Mm-hmm.
because much of my time was spent away at work, you know. And in this now, what's going on now is they have like sage dinners that we attend, and we do things in the community now where people will see me. I don't know who they are, but they know who I am. Um,
Right,
through Karen. See, Karen is the spearhead. I'm Karen's husband.
right,
You know, in the department, Karen was my wife.
right. Karen was Ish's wife, but
Uh-huh.
now Ish is like you are
Karen's
Karen's
husband.
husband. That's
Yep.
the name that get mentioned. So let me ask you this as we move to the next section where we talk about some of the biggest changes you have witnessed in the culture, in tech, the economy, gender, race, politics. I want to ask you this question in shifting. What tradition or institution do you fear that we're losing? And, like that you hope that we could restore? And just in the broadest sense, it doesn't have to be work related or anything, but just as you think from back when you started out in Oklahoma, first came to California to all these years here, what's going on with our politics. What are some of the institutions or the institution you see that we're losing that if you had your druthers, you would restore?
Okay, that first thing that comes to mind is after school sports.
Hmm.
I thought that it really helped kids, especially latchkey kids, whose parents worked, and it kept them focused on being together and interacting and doing something positive. Now, when we moved away from that, gang activity shot through the roof
Mm.
because kids are they got no one at home because the parents are at work, and from 3 to 5 they're hanging out together, you know, and that's not a good thing. I would go back to that.
Hmm.
Um, I'm really like to get back to the sense of it takes a village.
Hmm.
And it takes a village means that the adults are paying attention and are not butthurt when you tell them that their kids are not behaving properly, you know, um, that it's important to respect your elders. It's important to respect each other, those kinds of
Hmm.
things that are instilled in you by the village, proper
So,
behavior.
right. And that which leads to this question then in this section. What are some of the biggest changes you have witnessed, you know, again, in the culture, in tech, in the economy, around gender and race and politics?
Okay,
Um,
the first thing that comes to mind there is voting rights.
hmm.
Um, and we worked on it, and now they're trying to undo it.
Seem like we're losing it.
Yeah, but I thought that uh, my father made it important to me to vote,
Hmm.
and he says if you don't vote, don't complain.
Mm.
you know, because you don't have a voice. You've given your voice away. And I've always took that to heart. The other thing is that marginalized people began to have a voice from uh, the 60s, 70s, 80s,
Hmm.
90s. And when I say marginalized people, I mean women.
Hmm.
I mean, trans people, gay, lesbian, whatever, um, black,
People of
young,
color.
yeah, people of color, began to have a voice.
So don't consider me facetious for asking this, but why is it important that marginalized people have a voice.
because they are part of America.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's, let me see, how can I say this? It to me, that's like a leader surrounding himself with yes men. You get no difference of opinion. You get no fresh ideas. You get marginalized people don't have a voice. That's a voice that we lose, and all that we end up having is the voice of the white
The
supremacists.
privilege. Uh, Ish, talk to me a little about changes you have seen in technology, because I know we've seen a lot of changes, but yeah, talk about some of the changes you have seen here before we move to the next section. And by the way, how have some of these changes affected your daily life?
Okay, well, what we're doing right now is just an amazing
Yeah.
logical advancement. Um, when I think that I was born in 45 and I saw what cars looked like, my mother had that old my grandmother had that old Ford with the rumble seat in the back, and to self-driving cars today,
Mm.
uh, to me that is amazing. The fact that we put a man on the moon just because we could. The
Leaving people to be in disbelief and say it didn't happen.
you know, it's easier to argue with an intelligent person than it is to reason with a fool. You know, uh, there are certain things when someone says, uh, "Oh no, we didn't go to the moon. We just did." I just stopped talking to him because this is a conversation that is not going to be a conversation because facts
Hmm.
obviously don't mean anything. You know, they have been, they are being fooled by claiming to not believe that they have been fooled. It's just astounding to me. They told us a lie about being on the moon, not realizing that the lie is what they believe.
Yeah.
We didn't go.
So Ish, again, back to the technology, although we
Yes.
didn't leave it. What technology you think has the biggest impact on your daily life right today?
I would guess the computer,
Hmm.
because in many ways, the computer has made things more accessible and therefore easier in some ways to get some knowledge. Some you can ask a question and not necessarily have to go to an encyclopedia to get that
Or you
information.
don't even have to type in. You could actually speak and
Yes,
an
yes.
AI instrument will react with,
Now,
with your request.
I immediately saw that uh, the computer in the department as,
I think part of the challenge with using technology effectively is what kind of knowledge and attitude and value we take to the technology.
and here's another change, an extreme change. The telephone. The telephone that I grew up with was rotary, and you called Webster 935-1030 if you wanted to get me. If I didn't answer, it meant that I wasn't home. We didn't have a fax machine. What we have now is the phone is
A
actually has an
computer.
umbilical cord.
Yeah, it's a computer that we walk around with.
And the fact that if you don't answer it, you can actually offend someone. Actually, there's not. And Joe and the fellows know, from dealing with me for years, that I don't turn my phone on. I mean, I have it on vibrate unless I'm looking for a call and it vibrates, and then I'll look at it.
Right.
But I'm out in the yard most of my day. I'm away from this electronical experience doing what I do.
So that takes me to this question then, this next section about success, happiness, and legacy. What's your primary definition of success, of
Well, let me tell
happiness,
you about happiness first.
and legacy? And how has that evolved, by the way, for you?
Happy, uh, there is no way to happiness.
Mm,
Happiness is the way. And what that does, it takes you back to that moment, to moment. When you experience happiness, you're not looking for something else. Your mind is not off in the future seeking fulfillment, nor is it in the past seeking validation. When you're experiencing that happiness, it's now.
mm,
It is right now, and that is something that I try and live in. I enjoy.
mm,
So, I have some thoughts about philosophy, things that I kind of deal with on a daily basis. Uh,
Please share.
One is that you have to be present and you have to stand for something. You have to you have to be what you want to see. Oh yeah, it's be what you want to see in the world.
Mm,
Okay? And you have to have the courage to stand up for those principles. To me, that was the guiding force in the department. Is to
mm.
have the courage to stand up for the principles that is supposed to be driving the department.
So, by the
Um,
way, if you don't mind me, because it seemed like you're doing what I was gonna ask you to do for the next question, to offer advice to young men and future generations. So let's continue with
okay,
these philosophical ideas
okay,
that you have. You can take it as a part of defining success and happiness, but then also move right into advice that you'd offer to young men and future generation.
okay. I learned that vocation is important, but you should do something that you love. And if you work doing something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. So I've also had, to me, money is a tool. It's not something just to be hoarded. Okay, where we get into trouble in this capitalistic society is that money is to be hoarded and to be flaunted rather than to be used appropriately, I'll say. Right. See, when you talk about happiness and you talk about acquisitions, that gets me into this idea of desire and want.
Mm,
Okay. What happens with want or desire is I want a new car, I want a Lamborghini, I want this, that, and the other. And then when you finally get it, then you don't want it to be taken from you. It comes with
mm,
anxiety. So you have to be careful with what you want and what you desire and being able to manage that in terms of your momentary happiness. When I
mm.
say momentary happiness, I mean moment to moment to moment. So
Right.
you're not married to the desire specifically. Um, I have down here, what you want is a troublemaker, in life. It really often obscures the truth, so what you want and what leads to your happiness usually comes from within, not from without.
Mm,
Okay. So what we have a society is a society that focuses on what's without.
yeah.
Okay.
And what's within.
Right. And you see that played out over and over and over again in the decisions that are made and not being made. Um, if I were talking to, these people, I'd say, learn what the word enough means.
Mm,
Okay. And that's what I wish that as my legacy, if I were to wish something, I would wish that you have enough. And that means enough love, enough food, enough money, enough
Mm,
of whatever, so that you don't have to. I mean, let's put it this way. I have more
you
food than
need,
I need
yeah.
right now. However, that is enough to make me not worry about. Right. I wish you enough shelter,
Mm,
enough family,
mm,
enough work to keep you going in
mm-hmm.
this life and fulfilled, you know. So that is my,
Your encouragement.
and yeah, it's not only encouragement, but and it's universal
It's your
encouragement.
philosophy.
Yeah, you
So,
know.
Ish, what's the one mistake to avoid? I mean, part of your advice to young men. What's the one mistake to avoid? I mean, there are many, but which one would you highlight?
I think that I would say avoid taking women for granted.
About taking women for granted.
Yeah,
What habits?
because
What habit to build early?
what habit to
To build early. And it sounds as if you're going to add another one, maybe another mistake to avoid.
um I was just going to um kind of elaborate on that, taking women for granted, because when you do that, you undermine your ability to become a man. Now, you said what
What habit to build early? One habit to build early that you think that habit has taken you on your journey.
honesty? Uh-huh.
Mm,
See, honesty, because the truth is, and anything other than that detracts from what you are, you know. So honesty and integrity,
mm-hmm,
for me, kind of go hand in hand, and that would be like you talk of legacy, like in my chosen vocations, I felt that I was honest and true to the vocation, and served with integrity.
So I'm gonna pause. So welcome back
Hmm.
as we get ready for sort of the final segment of this interview, this discussion, this one-on-one.
Hmm.
And Ish, I'm gonna ask you to share kind of your closing story, your benediction, as it were. Um, if you could preserve one story, one message, one blessing for those who would come after you, as you look straight in this microphone, look in this recording device for this recording, what would you say? It's your story, and um, anything uh, that you have never said out loud that you want documented, this is a good time to say it.
And we had spoken about this. I would say, to my stepfather, I never said I love you to my stepfather. Um, but
And
that's for
do you
me.
want to just say it? Do you want to just say it now, even
Yes,
though he's not hearing it?
Charles, I love you and I miss you, and I thank you for who you were in my life. You know, um, I was able to say that to my mom because she was 95 when she passed here in our home. So, um, but I also understand that for how we grew up and how men interacted, uh, that was not necessary to say. It was necessary to enact.
Mm,
Uh, the other thing that I would say is that love is a two-way street.
mm-hmm.
Um, and if you find yourself in a situation where that doesn't exist, you need to make some adjustments. You know, life, it's not about possessions. It's not about possessing another human being.
Ish, you say you were born in 1945, right?
Yeah.
So that you turn 80 this year,
Yes, in January.
in January. Like over your life, what conclusion have you come to about this journey, like life and living, that if you knew way back then, you think it could have made your life better, and so you want to share this with others?
Uh, the first statement is life is worth living, and you have choices. And the second is that pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Mm,
So you cannot go through life without experiencing pain. You can, however, move away from suffering because too often we experience pain and emotionally, or psychologically, or physically, and we wallow in it rather than
mm.
doing what's necessary in terms of how you approach it, in terms of how you accept it, and in terms of how you move forward.
Ish, a smell that takes you back.
Jungle gardenia. That's a perfume that my first real girlfriend, who became my fiance, and who later became my, I guess, BFF, my best friend, female friend. That's what she used to wear,
Mm.
Jungle Gardenia.
A
Uh,
song that carried you through. And if you struggle with one, you can mention up to three, but it's really one, but that's fine.
well, the first one is High School, Hello Stranger. And that's the one that I learned how to cha-cha on and uh, really, really like that song.
Mm.
Next song now, I think the next song is What's Going On, Marvin Gaye. And that's right in there with Mercy, Mercy Me and but Marvin Gaye,
Yeah. As a civil rights anthem.
yeah, well, Marvin Gaye wrote about and he claimed to have been inspired to write about what's going on in the world today, and it's still going on. So that was a song that resonated, continues to resonate to this day. I even play that song in my yoga class. When you talk about music, because like in yoga, I play like world music and a lot of different kinds of
Hmm.
music from hip hop to reggae to uh, old time music.
Hmm.
When I say old time, I mean like Moonlight Serenade or something like that when things are calming down, or rock and roll. I might play something like that, if we're working real hard or something. So
Hmm.
um, there are a lot of songs that I really, really think are important and like, but of all of them, I think the one that stands out is Marvin Gaye's "What's Going On."
A time you change your mind.
I don't usually do that. I think there was a time at Gonzalez, there was an employee, Preston, and he's since passed on. But he did something to one of the people that were working there. He did something that I thought was underhanded and despicable. And that goes back to, my mother, being abused as my first, that
Mm.
just comes forward. Feeling that women have the right not to be exploited or, treated unfairly.
Hmm.
Uh, and he did that, and I was just unforgiving. I formed an opinion of him based on that was unyielding. So much so that Joe Nunn said to me, he said, Ish, are you ever going to forgive the brother? And I said, I don't know, Joe. I don't know. I just think that, that was just a shitty thing to do. And he just kind of went, oh, okay. Now, that's when I began to realize that the universe has a sense of humor.
Mm.
because the universe, in its infinite wisdom, made him my roommate. So I had to confront these feelings and then match them with the person that I was now.
Encountering.
Yeah, yeah. I
Mm.
mean, in direct contact for extenuating periods of time. And I began to appreciate him. He was an extremely intelligent young man. He was talented, but in terms of life experience, it was like he was kind of out of control. We say to the kids sometimes, man, control yourself. That's the hardest thing for anybody to do. Really, and yet we expect it of a kid that's
Mm.
only, in their teenage years. But anyway, I began to mentor him as best I could in terms of how how to behave in the world.
Right. But what you're saying in essence though is that he evolved to the place where you change your mind.
Yes. Now, I would even say that I evolved to the
Hmm.
place where I changed my mind. I became less rigid.
I'm more accepting,
Yeah, because he was the same
especially of
person.
differences.
hmm He was the same person. And
Yeah.
I knew him until he passed away.
A mentor you still hear in your head,
That would be Charles, my
Charles.
stepfather.
A regret you have made peace with.
Regret
Hmm.
that, and I'm not real sure that I've made complete peace with it. And it's the my father died of lung cancer in
Your biological or your stepdad.
no, my stepfather. My When I'm talking about my biological father, I always put biological in front of it,
Okay, okay.
because the person I see as my father was Charles.
Charles. Okay.
So he had lung cancer, and he had gone into the hospital. And mom said, well, if you're going to see him, you should probably come up today because, tomorrow is something else. And I said, okay, we'll try and get up there tonight. And I just couldn't get it together to get up there to see him. And when we got there, it was, visiting hours ended at 8 and we got there at like 9. And so we couldn't get in. So I went, and the idea was, if I had seen him, we would come back. He was in Santa Barbara. We'd come back to LA. But if I couldn't see him, we would spend the night at their house, at mom's house,
Mm.
and go see him in the morning. Well, he passed away that night. Not that night. Actually, he passed away at like 6 in the morning, something like that. There was a phone call, and mom answered the phone, and Karen immediately got up and went into the room. And then she said, "You better come in, you know." And mom told me that Charles had passed away that night. And I realized later on that my desire was to see him. My assignment was to be there for my mother. Because if we had seen him, she would have been alone when she received that information from the doctor. So we were there for her, and the first thing she said was, I mean, she knew that this was going to happen.
Right. It was.
Yeah, so she was kind of weeping and kicking her feet. She says, "I don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, that's why I'm here. You don't have to do anything.
Mm.
Karen and I will take care of everything that needs to be taken care of." Now, my regret is that I didn't get to see my father.
Right. But you've made peace with it.
Yeah, I have, but I also think that I'm rationalizing to a certain degree.
Wish
So,
wish you are. Sometimes that's kind of how we deal with the challenges.
mhm.
Um, I thought you were going to mention and Think about if you'd put this one up there also. Never getting the chance to see if you could become pro or not
Oh,
with basketball.
oh, I made complete peace with that. That that was a young man's dream
Mm,
that a man came to grips with in terms of who I really am.
right.
It, and I think to this day, I think that I really thoroughly enjoyed the time that I played basketball.
Mm. So here's your last question for the road. A photo you wish that everyone else could see, and why?
There are so many photos.
Right. But let's talk about one you wish everybody else could see.
I think I have to move out of just a photo of me.
Yeah, right. It doesn't have to be a photo of you.
There are two that come to mind. One is of my mother and my brother and I, and she's kind of, and we're together, and uh, and it's just, just a close up. Okay,
Good video.
yeah, because I'm going to.
What was it about the picture that you wish everybody could see?
It's just who we were to her.
Ah,
And it comes through that picture. Uh,
mm,
and I like the picture.
okay.
And the other
And
one
what's
I
the
was
next
talking
one?
about was I have a picture of Karen has four sisters, and there's a picture we took in the backyard before I did what I did, that has her mother and father, her four sisters, her daughters, my mother and father, both biological father and stepfather, and uh, the other children are all in this one picture. It's like this big
Wow.
blended family picture we took in the backyard. So I'll include that. Um,
Hmm. Why would you want others to see this picture?
to see the blended family that we have and had, because most of the people in that photo have passed. Both parents, her parents, my parents, two of her sisters, you know, um, all of my parents are gone. One,
Memories. It's
yeah,
memories. It's
yeah,
history.
and it's taken when Karen and I kind of first got together, and to me it kind of represents hope. That blended family thing is like hope for the country kind of thing. You know,
Can we all just get along?
one thing I would say is that people need to understand that hate uh, corrodes the vessel it's carried in.
Mm.
You know, it's corrosive and it destroys that vessel. So
And that's a fabulous note to end on. A reminder that hate is corrosive, and if carried in a vessel, it's corroding the vessel.
yep. Hmm.
Awesome. I thank you for this opportunity. And Ish, it is obvious that you have lived a good life, a full life. Your time with the probation department, your time serving our country in the military, your extracurricular activities, teaching yoga, your fly days. You obviously have have a wonderful story, and I hope those who are privileged to hear and to experience the narrative that you have shared regarding your life will take inspiration. Thank you again, and I wish you every success, even as you continue to do what you do in enjoying the fruits of your labor. Peace.